I need a thumbs up to wait. Okay, welcome. It is Tuesday, March 9th, 21 at approximately 5:01 p.m. We are convened as the Provo City School District Board of Education for our study session. We will begin with a roll call, and we'll start with Stephanie.
Stephanie Bryant, Business Administrator.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board President.
Keith Ertel, Superintendent.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
All right, and welcome to those that are here with us. We are going to begin with the construction update with Stephanie Bryant.
Good evening, everybody. Just a quick construction update. Not a lot of new items to report. Most of the projects that are underway right now are being bid for summer and spring projects. Mark's working through that. Obviously, Timpview is our biggest project going on, and I have a few updates there. If you'll bring up the parking scheme. We reported last time, I think, that Mark is working through trying to get some parking at one of the adjacent or down the street LDS parking lots. He's still working through that. They've got about 4 committees that has to go through. He's had 1 committee approve that, and it goes to the next successive committee 1 week at a time. So he's got 3 more committees to approve that. So about 3 more weeks, we should know whether or not that parking's been approved. He's hopeful, and he's wanted to make sure that we thanked the LDS Real Estate Group for working with us on that. So, but if you take a look at this schematic, I think Mark had sent it to everybody a little bit earlier. He just kind of outlined where some parking would be. You can see that starting here in April, the South Gym's going to be open, and I'll show you a couple new pictures of that in a moment. The weight room's getting ready to be shut down temporarily while we do some work in that area. And then if you'll scroll up, Darren. We will continue to have the west faculty parking available all the way through the project. And then if you scroll up a little bit more, the biggest impact you'll see is that northwest parking lot is going to be closed in a couple of weeks, well, about a month. The bus lane will remain open, and that area will become the construction staging. So the school is aware of these parking changes and what they'll need to do, and then in the meantime, we're obviously working through some extra parking. So
Stephanie, is there going to be any electric charging station for electric cars?
I do not believe that's in the plan. That would be, I mean, it might not be a bad idea if we could figure out how to cover the cost of it, but I don't think there's any in the plan. But that's where the Timpview parking is kind of set up. Mark's working through all that. Darren, if you don't mind, bring up just one of those pictures of the gym. The South Gym, the new South Gym's just about complete. There's an interior picture. Mark just sent a couple for us to take a look at. And the other one, Darren? And there's another one. So they're working through that, and it's pretty close to being opened up, so everybody will be able to see it in another few weeks. So that's the construction update. Again, we appreciate the LDS Church working with us to try to get through some of those parking issues that we're going to have. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. All right. The next is our school fees final review with Stephanie Bryant and Devin Daly.
Guess I should just stay up there. I'm going to have Devin come up and just highlight a couple of things for you. We discussed school fees last month at the board meeting. Per state code, we have to have discussions on it twice in public meetings and public input twice. So tonight is our second meeting. We will be asking for approval of those school fees in the business meeting tonight. So Devin, go ahead.
The main reason I'm here is to answer any questions that may have come up in the last month since we talked about it. Also, the website, provo.edu/school-fees is all updated, and it's all translated into Spanish. There's a button at the top that has, I'm not going to try to say it in Spanish because I would butcher it, but we have both the Spanish and English updated with this year's fees that will be approved for tonight. Also, I know that there's been some discussion about some of the fees being high. I just wanted to remind the board the requirement that the state has that anything that is required for a student to participate has to be included on the fee sheet, where that was not the case before. Before it was just what the parents were going to be required to pay or certain trips. So anything that a student is required to have or use, whether it's monetary or non-monetary, has to be on the fee sheet according to the state rule. So that's why some of the fees may look a little higher, is because generally a lot of those fees have been covered by fundraising in the past, but that has to be included.
Devin, can you repeat that web address again?
.edu. So
or-
it's provo.edu, and then is it forward or backslash? Whichever, and then school-fees. And it's there by school or by activity. And then if you go up at the top on the right, there's the link for the Spanish pages. And also with the Spanish policy, and the summaries will also be posted.
And we also have representatives from both Timpview and Provo High here if you have any questions for the principals directly about any of those fees. Boyd and
Momi.
I've had a bad day today. My mind just.
All right, looks like McKay, you have a question?
Are we taking a lot of calls believing that
No, there haven't been very many.
high number is what we require?
No, there hasn't been a lot of calls, but you know, I've had a couple parents, excuse me, over the last years talk about how high the fees are, and I tell them exactly what I said here, is that anything that is required for a student to participate has to be on the fee sheet. The only thing that doesn't is donations made by anyone, or fundraising that is not required to use students. So anything that students are required to participate in have to be on there.
So maybe from our high schools, just up or down, are you taking a lot of calls on that? Okay. So, because it is confusing, and that's a big number.
In the state's quest for transparency, they've made it very, very difficult for parents to understand. But that was what the rule required.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead,
On
Terry.
page 19 of the district-wide fees document, it says that school lunch and breakfast are not subject to fee waiver.
Correct. So that fee waivers are not able to be used. It's the free and reduced lunch is a different process than fee waiver.
Okay.
So the fee waiver process is done through the school's financial secretary and the principals, and any lunch issues are done directly through lunch with the lunch certification. They're different forms. We are not legally allowed to use those same classifications.
On pages 22 through 24, does this reflect this year's summer school fees or just in general?
So this year's, nobody had any changes. So this year's and next year's are both the same. So nobody requested any changes for summer school, except I know Timpview had one change. Their packets went down for things that were done during the summer and school year, but.
And Terry, depending on what we do with summer school, because of the unique situation with COVID, those fees may be something we waive this year.
That's what I was wondering about, because this summer school's going to be not the same.
We may end up waiving those fees this summer. So.
And that is generally the case, but this is our only chance to have any fees that might be charged between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022.
Because
So
the state makes you do that.
Correct. So the state requires us to approve fees before April 1st, 4 months before the next school year.
Devin, it's been a couple of years since I've thought about this, but in years past, we have generally treated these as a maximum fee, right? It can charge up to this amount.
So if you look at all of the spots, there is a total required participation and then a maximum school activity fee for
Right.
most of the activities. So that's the most that can be charged for any one activity. And then you have the $5,000 maximum for student.
But it doesn't mean you're automatically going to be paying
Nope.
the max.
It does
Okay.
not matter. So there's a lot of things that are below the line of required participation fee, like field trips or overnight travel. Those are only charged if those things happen.
Thank you.
Any other further questions for Devin? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Devin, for all your work on that. You've put a lot of time and effort into that, and principals as well. We appreciate your help with all that.
Before we go on, Stephanie, could, for the good of the board, could you just take a moment and explain what happens now? We have to submit our plan to the state. They have to make sure that we've signed off on it, and then certification is granted to us, correct? So.
Yeah, so it has to be approved by in-state rule by April 1st. And then they'll just, when they come out and do our audit, they do a compliance audit to make sure we met all of those criteria that are in state rule and state board.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, budget requests and adjustments. Stephanie.
Real quickly, we have 3 budget requests this month that are over 50,000. These are primarily in relation to funding for a couple of different incentive pays for employees. The very first one is to add both the revenue and the expenditure budget related to the legislative teacher and support staff stipends. So the $1,500 and the $1,000 stipend that the state is providing. That is the first budget adjustment, and it's a net effect of 0 because that's funded by the state. The second request is for a budget of 1.2 million, and that 1.2 million is comprised of 2 things. One is the backfill on the state stipend for those that are not covered by the state. As you recall at the board retreat, we talked about whether or not the board wanted to cover those. That's only about, I think, $130,000, if that. The remainder of that 1.2 million is the 1% district bonus. Bonus is probably a bad word. District incentive that we'll be paying to employees that we talked about at the retreat. And then the third and final one this month is just to shift the budget for the Timpview High School rebuild out of the building reserve fund and over to capital fund now that we have the bond passed.
Stephanie, did you notice HB 450 at the end of the session?
Sorry, which one was that?
HB 450, they expanded the list.
Yes, I did see that, with the exception of the HVAC capital piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that, thank you. So there's a budget approval in the business meeting.
That was for the stipends. That's what they expanded the list of.
That was the stipends, yes.
They expanded who could get the stipends.
Yeah,
We wouldn't have to back.
Yeah, and we went through that, and there's still a small group of people, obviously, that they
Yes,
don't cover, but
it should be smaller, right?
yep. Yeah, Devin and Joe picked that apart pretty good, so we should be good to go.
All right, are there any further questions about this? And we'll be asked to be passing that later on in the business, right? Okay. All right, land trust plan amendments, Alex Judd.
Good evening. We have a couple of schools that are adjusting their budgets a little bit because of the impact of the COVID situation. So Westridge and East School are looking to adjust their plans just a little bit, and it's more or less changing the way they're spending their money. The goals would remain the same, so it's not a major change, but after visiting with Rebecca, there's a number of changes enough that we felt like we probably should just make you aware of it. Westridge is going to be, because they weren't able to use their money to purchase Playworks and use the funds the way they intended because of the phasing process, that money is still there, and they want to utilize that money through renewing their contract with a few companies with IXL and iReady with that money that they have there, so that that money is being spent and continue to be used for long term there. eSchool was going to be using some of their funds to do field trips and getting kids to different places throughout the state to help them build their background knowledge and experiences that align to their goals, but because they were not able to do that, that money is still carried over. So they were wanting to purchase Chromebooks to be able to allow them to do a little bit more of the virtual field trips and still give kids access to those experiences, not only this year, but in the future if things are still in the same condition we are now. So those are the two changes they wanted to make. Just some budget cost is going to be a little bit more. Therefore, they wanted to make sure that you guys knew what was going on. Okay,
Any questions about these trust lands plans?
Okay.
Okay.
We'll need your approval in the regular meeting. Thank you.
Okay. On March 18th, I don't have my phone in front of me. The next is items for the city district meeting. Is that March 19th? I can't remember. Thursday?
I think it's the 18th.
The 18th.
It was
So
18th.
next, not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday, we have a meeting scheduled with the city council, and we just need your suggestions of what we would like to talk about. We are hosting it. So,
You want me to?
go ahead.
I thought that maybe the city just had Women's Day on Saturday, and if the city's already planning to do some kind of fun thing, we should coordinate with them so that the kids can have something fun to do, since this has been kind of a crappy year, and anything we can do to coordinate with them. I know that usually Bike Day is coming up, but I don't know if they're doing that. Any kind of something we can coordinate with them, that would be good, some fun day. And something else is not just doing these joint meetings with the city council, but maybe including the state legislators as well. We probably would have to ask the city council if they would like to invite the state legislators as well. Any other ideas?
Jennifer, did you have some?
Yeah, so at our last one, we talked with them about safe routes, and I think it would be good if we can, Alex and some of the city people have been going around to the different schools and updating what they've come up with, but I think it'd be helpful for city council to hear the progress that has been made and some of the plans that are being put in place at some of our schools.
Go ahead, McKay.
We sort of asked them, to sort of compile some numbers about new housing, how many are, what units they are planning, they see the city adding the next 10 years, 20 years. I mean, there's a lot of excavation equipment out and about in the city all of a sudden. There's lots of curb and gutter I see going out. There's a lot of high density housing, but I don't know if that's 1 or 2 bedroom or how that'll impact our schools. So
Is that different from what Mark sent us a little while ago?
If their permitting, yeah, I mean, their permitting process, so if we could just check in with the city council, because
Yeah,
how they do it sort of is the throttle. They decide what they're gonna approve and what they're gonna let developers pay for. And so that really has an effect, as we've seen it.
So you want to know more about the process of how things get passed through?
Yeah, and their philosophy of growth, I guess.
Okay. Was that what you were going to ask?
No, I was just going to say, in that graph that we saw, it said downtown is going to have a huge amount of housing, but how many of it is actually going to have kids? Because like the last RDA we had, they said they don't expect to have any kids in that, so.
Yeah. Anything else?
Along with that, it might be helpful to find out what developments are on the books right now. That, again, this is all for the purpose of being able to plan and know where we might have to shift resources around from neighborhood to neighborhood.
So we're going to approach kind of the legislature passed a bill that says all the state's health orders end on April 10th. How's the city going to react? Is the city going to put in a mask, something? If it's not the governor says he thinks that's good. Are they making any plans, or is it just back to normal? So their COVID response after April 10th would be good.
That's a good idea. Anything else? Anybody else wants to add? Okay.
Do you want me to respond to Cliff and see if the city has anything they want added to it?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Stephanie.
So if we're hosting, does that mean we're hosting it in person, or are we
No,
still
it's
doing
still going to be
virtual?
via Zoom.
Okay.
I think that's the way they feel comfortable doing it.
For now, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So, okay. Next, COVID discussion. I'm going to start just with a small recap of what's been going on in the safety committee meetings, and then we can go into the other part in just a minute. Jason Garrison gave me a running total up to now on test to play. Independence High School has had 89 total tests administered with 0 positive results. Provo High School has had 2,146 total tests administered and 28 positive results, about 0.01%. Timpview High School has had 2,238 total tests administered with 9 positive results, and about 0.004%. So altogether, with all the Provo City School District high schools, we've had 4,473 total tests administered with 37 positive results, or 0.008%. So it's an extremely low number. We've also been holding with the State Health Department on Thursday and Friday afternoons up at Grandview. We're still hosting the rapid COVID testing, and that's still going well. And Doug, we're still doing that through March. Okay. I would like to say thank you to everybody who participated with the survey. And I'm going to ask Caleb if he would be willing to give us an update on the survey results.
Okay, real quickly on the survey results. In total, we had a little over 11,000 results combined with all the the student, the community, the employee surveys, which of all the COVID-related surveys that we've done this year, that's by far the highest response we've got, especially from our student population. The general numbers, we asked each group to let us know what they thought about moving all of our schools to full-time school or phase 3, and then asked them to vote or comment on just moving the high schools or just the middle schools or just the elementary schools to full-time school. When you combine all of the groups' results, about 55.7% voted no to moving all schools to full-time, with 44.3% voting yes. With just the high schools, 53.9% were no, with 46.1% yes. With just the middle schools, 50.2% were yes, 49.8% were no, and with just the elementary schools, 56.7% were yes and 43.3% were no. Yesterday, the board has provided the results broken down by school, by feeder patterns, a lot more breakdowns than I'm going over right now. The other thing I wanted to mention real quick is just some of the themes that we saw as we responded or read all of the open response comments from all of the groups. In general, the employee and the community and the student concerns were pretty similar. The employees have a couple that are different that I'll get to here in just a minute. But overall, the main concerns were concerns with lunch, specifically at the high school level. A lot of comments suggesting to keep it where we are for the rest of the year since we're so close to the end of the school year. Consistency, it's a good balance right now. the mental health of students, kids can't handle that change again right now. A lot of comments asking from the community, specifically asking the board to look at what the teachers and students were saying and take that into account. And their vote would be, they'd be okay with whatever the teachers and students were saying. A lot of comments about students' jobs and internships, and then also parents' jobs being scheduled around the current schedule and having a hard time rescheduling all of those things for, I don't remember how many times it is now, 2 or 3 times that this has changed this year. A lot of comments about schools having a hard time enforcing social distancing and mask wearing, and having more kids is just going to make that even harder. And suggesting we don't do it until students are able to receive the vaccine as well. A lot of comments saying yes, they're okay with the change as long as masks are enforced, and about just as many comments saying yes, they're okay with the change if masks are removed. And then there are a lot of concerns about the cleaning process remaining, and concerns about the amount of homework. When you take the employee results, they were pretty similar. They also had a lot of comments about testing coming up in Q4 and the effects that the change might have on the testing for students. Asking to do what is truly best for students, saying they don't have enough prep time right now, and they don't feel like there'd be any significant academic gains made by making this switch. All of those results and all of the open response comments are now posted on the website. Just so for transparency purposes, we did remove 59 comments from the open response just due to vulgar and inappropriate language. And then we did send the survey out in Spanish. We had 218 responses on that survey, plus a handful in Spanish that came through on the English side as well. So if you have any questions, I can answer those.
Anyone have questions for Caleb about the survey? Thank you for going through that. There was a lot to go through.
Yeah, it was a lot of data.
Questions, it was a lot to
yeah.
look through. Did you have questions?
I was just going to say thank you to you and Shauna and everyone else who's worked hard to go through that, and also for your good summary of all the comments, because we did not have time to read all of them from the time we got them, but I appreciate that.
It took 6 of us most of the day yesterday to get through all of those, so if you read even half of those, good job.
I just want to add to that, because there's like 900 PDFs that these guys issued. It was like, I think to just make the PDFs would have taken a whole day. So I can't believe how much work you guys did. That was very impressive.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and to tell the rest of your team thank you as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Something else that I just wanted to bring up on the safety committee meeting on Monday. I think it was Monday. There's been a lot of them. We asked Suzanne Livingston at the County Health Department what her feelings were about moving forward. We didn't get a really definitive answer. I know somebody on the board had asked about that, and her feeling was that with the mask mandates going away on April 10th, as long as we were continuing with the mask mandate, she would be okay. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong if I got that wrong. Okay. But yeah, so that was her big concern, was with the mask mandate mandate going away on the 10th.
So sorry,
April
to
10th.
clarify, you're saying regardless if we go to 3 or stay in 2.5, she just says as long as we're wearing masks, she's okay with whichever way we go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, she's more concerned that the masks will be going away.
And if I can add to that, we're not sure what clarifications are going to come down regarding masks. A question has been asked by a number of teachers. Is a classroom a gathering? Is school overall a gathering? That term has been used in the governor's speech last week, and we're looking for clarification. You could argue either way. We're just wanting to know how they define these things. So that may inform this discussion a little bit at some point, because as of April 10th, we're going to have to know.
We created a mask mandate in this district before the state issued their mask mandate, didn't we?
I think that was a statewide?
We're about to have our discussion, and then they came out with like a day or so before they did in schools have a mask mandate,
Okay,
so we
okay,
didn't
because we
have to
were
address
pretty much
it
gonna
as a
vote
board.
that in, right? So do we need to vote one in before?
Is the COVID manual, does the COVID manual state mask mandate or anything?
No, and the legislation says, masks may still be required for gatherings over 50. So does that mean passing times? Does that mean, certainly that means, I don't know how you do that with lunch anyway, or, so, choir class. It's as clear as it is always.
Well, to be safe, should we just vote one in like on our next meeting?
I think this is something that we could definitely put on the agenda for the March 3rd.
And there's bound to be some additional information.
In the next week or two.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's do that on the March, we've moved that to March 30th, March 30th. So we'll move that to then. Okay. So I want to open this up to the idea of possibly moving the schools to phase 3. We've had a lot of people email us. We've had a lot of people with the survey results. I've been in the safety committee meeting. How many meetings has it been, Jason? 142. Lots of meetings. So what I want to do is I just want to open it up to hear from each of you what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, and we can go from there in a discussion. So
can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
Does our professional staff have a recommendation?
Well, didn't we, two of the purposes of moving to phase 2.5 was attendance and home study. Do we have a report on those two programs? I don't know, how many days has it been since those two programs have been put in place? And do you have enough data to make?
So Doug he does have some data for the attendance. I'm not sure if you have the home study, but Terry, you emailed me about, 2 weeks ago or so and asked about that. Doug has that for tonight. Let me explain the methodology, because, when we talk about studying or gathering attendance data, it can mean a lot of different things. So I took the request, maybe I was wrong here, but I took the request to say we want to know how students are attending on Fridays versus Monday through Thursday. So, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've been taking attendance all year long, but it hasn't been in line of compulsory attendance where we, of course, had the option of virtual, home study. So we started with February 1st as the first data point when we know that all programs K through 12 were going to be expected to take attendance, and we'd asked everyone to attend. So we broke down every day during the month of February, including last Friday, to look at that data, and we found that while the first Friday there was a drop of maybe 1 to 2% of the attendance rate, that by the second and third weeks, those numbers on Friday became consistent with every other day of the week. Right now, attendance rates are ranging anywhere from about 90% up to 94% in all of our schools. We looked at it school by school, both elementary and secondary. And like I said, there was a little bit of a below that by a couple of percent on the first couple Fridays. But by the end of February, 1st of March, there were some times that Friday had better attendance than Monday through Thursday, as far as looking at it day by day. So that's the attendance report as far as a comparison with the data that we had to. Thank you, Superintendent, for describing the methodology. As far as home study is concerned, there are still a number of individuals that are in the home study program. Schools have reached out to Human Resources, Teaching and Learning, and Student Services for support as what they deemed as necessary for them to receive, in some cases, just some additional resources, in some cases, even so far as having a homebound teacher assigned to them. I'll call that, again, a state of somewhat equilibrium that we've arrived at, where people seem to be working all right for now. If we were to make a phase change, we would need to reevaluate all that as to based on what people's needs were, as well as how much resource an individual classroom teacher could be to someone in the home study. So we'd anticipate we'd need to provide more resources if we went to a phase 3.
Was there a significant drop in home study numbers from 2 to 2.5?
There was a significant number because, again, each family was essentially contacted by their principals. Somewhere around probably 75 to 80% of the individuals in home study went to either e-school or came back to school. So the significant drop, maybe 3/4 of the students opted to go to one of those more consistent options, while a very small population remained with the home study option. And that's when as I mentioned, those 3 departments tried to be very helpful to the school administration on identifying on a case-by-case basis what the need was.
I don't know if you have that on top of your head, but do we know if when we went from 2 to 2.5, is there been an enrollment increase?
Generalized to the whole district?
Yeah.
You know, the trend in the fall was that there was this kind of, as maybe we were identifying who was coming back and who wasn't, I would say there was a gradual decrease in enrollment, particularly the elementary level, during the fall, probably right up until about November, December, and then it just kind of held steady. I was looking at those numbers every Friday, so this is a little off the top of my head.
Right.
But it was notable that secondary stayed pretty flat throughout that entire time frame. There wasn't really a significant decrease in most of our secondary numbers, school by school. Then around the time, and you could relate this back to the decisions to come back to phase 2 from phase 1, or it just happened chance with the time of year that it was, that we began to see both of those just stay stable. And I would say over the past month, since about December, so the months of January, February, and the 1st of March, we've seen a slight increase, not significant, but maybe a handful, a dozen or 2 students in each of those levels who have actually come back to school. And it could be everything from just movement within families and homes and so forth, but we haven't lost students since about Christmas on a regular rate since we've come back to school with the Christmas break.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
So Doug, sorry, can I get some clarification?
You bet, Rebecca.
So you're telling me that we're getting on average about 90 to 95% attendance in the schools on a weekly basis. Do we know what that average attendance was before February 1st without Fridays?
We don't, because again, while we were taking attendance as something that was associated with needing to know who's in the building, that number would be probably problematic for us to compare apples to apples because of the need for us to, the effort was made to saying this is now our membership we're taking, where in the past it was participation scores. So I could share with you some of what we're having with participation scores, or even just give you that number just so you could see it in general. But it would be probably unfair to say that we know exactly that number with the emphasis or the follow-up on taking attendance where it wasn't really in place administratively until February 1st. But I could provide that for you if you gave me just a little bit of time to run a report next week. Jennifer.
Along those lines, is the 90 to 94 about in line with a normal school year for attendance?
You know, typically, one of the qualifications for a school in the past to kind of make the grade, you know, when we talked about they take your end of year statistics and you take your dropouts and so forth, there was an attendance rate that was there, and your target was around 95% to be able to meet that standard. That's kind of historic based on previous years of the school report card and so forth. So the target was always to try and get 95% or as close as you could to average daily attendance. Otherwise, you lost some points there. So I know that this is probably a little bit lower than what the general statistic is, maybe 3 to 4, 2 to 3% lower than what an average school year is like about average daily attendance. You could attribute that to a lot of things. People are gratefully not coming to school sick. So there's something to be said. If you're not feeling well, whether you're an employee or a student, it's been a breakthrough for us, frankly, a little bit to make sure that if you're feeling any symptoms, you stay home. So that's probably had one of the factors as to why that attendance rate might be just a little lower. Note that the people who are on home study aren't taken into this daily attendance. They're already marked with what's just called a home study exemption, so it shouldn't be bringing that number down.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Doug.
McKay, you asked a question. Is there a way we can get that answered? Do you want to ask it again?
Yeah. Is there a recommendation that's clear to you? This is what we ought to do.
So in prepping for this tonight, I asked Melanie if she wanted to attend our council meeting yesterday, and she did. And our first thing was that we went around the room and asked everybody their opinions. And so I'm just wondering, Melanie, would you like to report your impressions about what you heard in that?
So what I heard was many people felt like a few weeks ago, they felt like the time would have been right to move to phase 3, but given the new circumstances and the new things that they've learned, that they feel like staying in phase 2.5 would be best. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's what I heard.
Okay.
What did we learn?
What do you mean?
Knowing what we know now, you say?
Yeah, what were the new things that we learned? That you would have wanted to move back a couple weeks ago, but we've learned something?
They didn't really go into full detail on that type of stuff.
I think a lot of it was the feedback that we've seen, that a lot of it that you all have passed on, and probably the survey, and these other folks can chime in if they want, but I think a lot of it had to do with just all of the feedback and comments and whatnot we've heard in the past few weeks.
And I'm not saying this to take a stand one way or another, but I have taken note of the number of comments that have come in either by email or in the survey about we've learned in a shortened day and in shortened periods to cut out a lot of the fluff and to focus on the essentials, and that is helping us move the curriculum along, even though we have less contact time. We're hearing that fairly consistently from teachers across all levels.
Can I?
Go ahead.
And students as well, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So what you just shared rang true for me personally. So I was excited to look into phase 3, hopeful to move to phase 3, especially I have children in the district and feel that would be a great thing for them. And about a week or two ago, if you'd asked me, I'd say, oh, I think we'll probably go to phase 3. And as I've studied it more, I feel if it were clear cut that most of the different things we've studied, like how will the custodians do with it, how about transportation, how about academic benefit, mental health, all these things, if most of those were clear cut, yes, it's a benefit, I'd say let's do it. But it is not clear cut. There are a lot of concerns or potential concerns that make me say the consistency of where we're at. People are saying that they're in a good routine. A lot of, especially the secondary students, are feeling like they finally figured out how to balance their time with their studies, and adding more time to the day would actually maybe hurt that and figuring out how they're balancing with everything. We've heard from custodial that it would be really difficult for them to meet all their normal cleaning needs plus the extra COVID measures. Our Teachers Association has told us that they have met and they officially oppose the move to phase 3. And if our teachers, that was a big thing for me this whole time. If it's going to be too much of a burden on our teachers, taking away some of what they're using right now as prep time, then it's not worth the move. They're not going to be effective in helping our students, and any academic benefit we might gain won't be worth it. I'm also concerned still, even though our high schools say they've got a plan for lunch. I have high schoolers and know that students that age, even if you tell them to sit 6 feet apart while they eat, they're not going to, and that's a concern. We've been so safe. So for 9 weeks, I feel like we can just stay with the consistency we have, the rhythm everybody's in, and can still make some great academic progress the rest of the school year the way we are.
Okay, Melanie?
Go ahead.
You care if I jump in?
Yeah.
I just want to talk about the survey. I personally, as I remember growing up, 4th term, I had no interest in school whatsoever. So I wasn't surprised. I think, did we get survey results from about 4,000 students? So 4,000 students energetically participated in this democratic process, and they told us that they were not interested in more school, which was not a shock, because I don't think, I never expected students to vote, go to 2 more hours of school a day. I don't care what the situation would be. I was shocked that 25% actually said, "Oh yeah, more school. That sounds awesome." So kudos to our students. But for the purpose of the survey, I'm going to kind of discount what our students said because they have, and I shouldn't. They're what it's all about. But I'm going to discount it and kind of go through some of the numbers. I thought it would be interesting to break things down. So if you had a kid at an elementary school, you were able to say what you want for high school, middle school, and the elementary school. And that your results went to the survey. So I thought it'd be interesting to just look at the parents who had people in elementary school and what they said elementary school kids should do. And by the same token, I also thought it'd be interesting to look at if you're an elementary school teacher or a high school teacher, just look to see what that teacher said for that grade. I thought it would be interesting to break that down that way. And the first thing that kind of blew my mind, because I've been getting letters from teachers like crazy, was the elementary school teachers were almost 50-50 about moving to phase 3. This blew my mind because I hadn't heard a single word from a teacher that they were interested in expanding the day. That number went down for teachers. It went to about 33%, or for about 35% in middle school teachers were interested in expanding the day, and then it went down to about 25% of high school teachers, with 75% saying no. So there's a big shift in how teachers in the different grade levels viewed the move. And again, now I'm not disparaging teachers or anything, but I've had a lot of employees in my life, and I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I've never known an employee that wanted to work more for the same amount of money. And that's essentially what we're asking our teachers to do. And the fact that 50% of the elementary school teachers said, "Yeah, that sounds great," that just blew me away and showed me, what wonderful teachers we have. And there are a lot of excellent reasons why teachers would say, "Hey, no, I don't think it's a good idea." So I'm not saying, one's more altruistic than the other, but I thought that was interesting. But then we get to the community numbers. And for elementary school kids, parents, the number was like 77% of community members who had elementary school kids wanted their elementary school kids to have more time in class. And you can, especially with all the DLI programs we have, all the different programs we have, it's the time with our teachers is essential. And that's, people say, "Oh, well, we're being really efficient," but especially for those younger grades, it's so important for them to spend time with their teachers. That's why teachers are valuable. And parents recognize that. So they know that the stresses that their kids are under. They know all the problems that their kids are under, and yet they say, "My kid would do better with more time." The number starts to shift when we go to middle school. It's like the Centennial, I think it's like 60% of the parents wanted more time in middle school, and 40% were against it. And by the time you got to high school, it was like, 35, 30, the Provo High number wasn't there, but I think it's like 36% wanted more time in school. And this makes sense because, high school kids are living active lives. You're going from a 60-minute class to a 90-minute class. There's a lot of diminishing marginal returns in those final 30 minutes. And maybe that's something we need to think about as a district going forward, just, the value of that class. But it was a big number of parents who did not want their kids to be in phase 3. And I just thought those numbers were interesting. And I really don't want to discount what our parents want. And so that's my view.
Can I add to that with Stephanie? Could you talk a little bit about, you told us a little bit about a possibility of doing just elementary versus not, and what the big challenges there are.
Yeah, you have a pretty big logistical challenge with transportation if you only do one grade level or another. And I think I sent you all those emails with some scenarios that Troy over transportation worked out. Because of the midday kindergarten runs and special ed runs that take a lot more time and they're in between, in order to have time to turn those bus buses around, run those routes, and get them back to the next grade level, because they're the same drivers, because we tier our routes, you would literally you'd have to shift one grade level or another's bell schedules. You'd have to make some changes to bell schedules, and then if, in the one example, if we were to go full day elementary, but keep the secondaries short, we'd still have to add some time to the secondaries day to give those buses time to turn around. So it's not impossible, but it's going to require some changes systematically to what we're doing.
Steph, when you say grade level, you mean school level, right?
Yeah, sorry. Elementary, middle school, secondary.
So to be,
There's not really three. There's elementary and secondary. It would be, is that right? Or is there?
Yeah,
would
I mean,
be-
there was
You
one.
need to make a decision about the middle school?
There was one
Or-
comment out there saying, what if you did elementary and middle school and kept high school there? That was not a scenario I had Troy run through. I had him run through holding elementary or secondary.
Right.
Or flipping them. But, I mean, we could look at any scenario, but it's going to require some changes, and possibly, even though those schools might have an early out, they might have to stay an extra 40 minutes to give those buses time to turn around.
So Boyd, I'm looking at you, and Momi, beyond changing the bells, is there a way to use 40 minutes in advisory or letting a student go back to the teacher that they want for 40 minutes? Would that be a disaster?
It would be a challenge. It would be a significant challenge.
So you would-
For these kids, and don't have really tight controls with attendance, they tend to disappear. So it wouldn't be valuable time. We could figure out a way to maximize it the best we can, but it wouldn't be valuable time.
But it wouldn't be valuable time. Would it 40 minutes more? I mean, I'm just trying to think if, I know that they disappear, but that's, in high school, that's what they get to do. If they wanted to go get more help, they could go help, and if they wanted to ride the bus, this would be something, that's also a possibility, though, as I guess is what I think about
I
it.
could just make a comment. Supervision would become one of our biggest challenges, is when you let 1,900 kids out and say, go do something productive. There's going to be lots of kids waiting for the bus who are going to find mischief, and we would have to ramp up supervision to accommodate that.
So you would change the bell?
What's that?
You would change the bells?
Meaning you would probably add like 5-10 minutes to each class.
Each class.
Yeah.
Right now, with our current schedule, lunch begins at 12:10, which is when class gets
Yeah.
out. If we added 40 minutes, kids are starting class at 7:30. That's a long time to go without food. So
Yeah.
we would have some problems.
I was about to say the other challenge with that is you add 40 minutes, now you got to start thinking about what to do with the lunch schedule.
so there's what you're saying is there's not a good way to isolate elementary into a phase 3 situation without affecting secondary, correct?
No. Yeah, there
Okay.
really isn't.
Is there a possibility, so that's if you went a full day of elementary, if you just added time to the elementary, but not, and we're a half an hour short, does that get us closer to what we need to do?
No, I think that would actually, I'm trying to think of the way they run. That might actually make it worse. I'd have to look at it. I don't know the bell schedules off the top of my head well enough to answer that, but you definitely would have to play with those schedules a bit. There's just no easy way to do it because we tier our routes for efficiency and for not having more buses than we need and more drivers than we need, and typically that's how school districts will run their routes.
Melanie?
Yes, go ahead.
I went in and talked to the staff, the professional staff, not just the principals, but some other people as well. And I'm a mental health professional. And even before the suggestion of phase 3, I was hearing that there was an increase in teachers seeking out mental health help from our school social workers. And so I've heard some rumblings, well, the teachers just don't want to work harder. I don't blame them. We have put so much on our teachers. their mental health is suffering. Not all of them, and I think that bears out in some of the numbers that we've seen in different things. But for me, I look at physical safety first. I feel fairly comfortable with physical safety. I feel like we're doing all right, especially with masks and distancing. As soon as we start adding additional time, then we run into, are we going to get the sanitization that we need? I still have a question about the masks. What's going to happen with that? Hopefully we could do that if we wanted. I wonder about distancing during lunches. And still at that physical safety, I still feel fairly comfortable with the research and everything that's happened. I am worried about consistency as a mental health professional. We have not allowed our students or our teachers, we've not given them any consistency. And I think a lot of times, I know that when I was first hearing students don't want to go, I was a nerd. I would have liked to have gone to phase 3 probably when I was in high school, in the small minority. But the way that our teens talk to us they don't sit down and say to us, hey, I'm really struggling because we went to phase 1 and then 2 and then back to 1. Then we were over here for 2 and I just don't have enough consistency. Can you please help me? What they say is, I don't want to go to school because I have a job, right? The way they talk to us is different than if they were adults. I think what the majority, are there some that just don't want to go to school? Absolutely. Are there a handful of teachers who just don't want to do the additional work? Probably. But what I'm seeing from a mental health perspective is we have not given them consistency. And I had a great email from a parent today or yesterday. She asked me, is it normalcy? Like, do they need the normalcy? Or you know, when you're saying consistency, is that normalcy? And I had to think about it for a minute. And what a great question, right? Do they need to get back to normal? Do they need to have their friends and the normal things? I would say it would be great to go back to normal, but what is normal? We can deal, as human beings, we can deal with some change in normalcy, as long as it's not too much change. Consistency is what we need, and they have not had consistency. And so if I am going to support a move such as big as a phase 3 support, I need to clearly see that the benefits outweigh the consequences. And so far I haven't seen that. I think there are some good benefits. I do not think that the consequences that we will pay for this will outweigh that. Another thing that I've seen is we have a lot of people who want us to make up everything in the 4th term. It is not going to happen. This is going to take years, not just for our district, for the world. And so, do I want our kids to catch up? Absolutely. It's going to take time. I would prefer that we do something targeted to that gap that we talk about has widened. Can we target it? Can we have some things that target it rather than a general thing? And then I hear about the custodial, and then I hear about the transportation, and I feel like we're doing backflips to give a little bit of extra time that I don't think is good. I think it will pay some benefits. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be any good, but I don't think the benefits that we're going to get from the backflips we're going to do will justify all of the stress that we're going to put on everybody, including our teachers, our students, and our administration. So that's my 2 cents.
I guess I would say I see it a little differently with the gaps that we've been seeing. They're just saying so large. With time, that's the one thing we cannot regain. We can't regain that. That's something that we have, but this is an opportunity that we could move forward, have 2 more hours of time. I was thinking this a little bit over the weekend. I was watching the Timpview basketball game, and congratulations for making it to the semifinals. Too bad they didn't win. But I was thinking about this in athletics. I don't know of a single sport that doesn't fight for every second, even tenths of a second, when it comes to the 4th quarter, anytime, to keep going, to do it. I know it's hard and that type of thing, but I just feel like this is an opportunity to give kids that to narrow that gap. There's no way we can fill the gap, but to bring it closer so that they can feel like the teachers have more time to, you know, Keith mentioned about taking out the fluff. Maybe having some of that fluff is okay, having some of that extra time to do that. Kindergarten's going to get an extra hour. They've been doing it for 2 hours. That's been really rough on the kindergarten families. There's going to be, there's kids that go home to no one still. This would be 2 hours of safety for them if they were to stay home, stay at school. When we have that extra time, I just see that this time would create opportunities in a lot of different things for the schools. And so that's where I'm kind of coming from. Go ahead, Terry.
Doug, is there a way to send some kind of message to the teachers and parents and students to make sure none of them are falling through the gap and know how to find the mental health resources that they need?
Yeah, there's discussions that we have in our COVID safety meetings, and oftentimes that question comes up when we develop surveys. Occasionally we use them. We have some of the surveys in the links there between right time and working with our association and others to identify the right timing, as well as the idea of making sure people refresh with what are the resources they have through their employment. And Jason knows a lot more about those that all our employees have access to. So I hear you. The mental health, of course, really resonates with student services, and what we can do to push out and find out what people are aware of that their helps are. We can certainly promote that more, Terry.
Because the notes that we read from, especially the safety meeting, it sounds like things are getting worse. And so I want to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. Thank you.
McKay.
Surveys have been such a disappointment all year. Oddly, they've always been a disappointment because almost every survey we put out comes back 50-50. All of a sudden we have 70-30 in groups. It's really hard for me to ignore 70-30. But that means there's a difference between secondary and elementary. And when it comes to the loss and what Melanie says, you know, we can't get time. So some of the early research, you know, the biggest drop is first grade. First graders are really paying a price, probably more than any other students, just in lost time. So I'm trying to, how do we thread that needle? And I know that it sounds like a massive undertaking, but it's really hard to ignore 70-30 on a survey when we've had so many that are just 50-50, you guys decide. This is not 50-50 in some areas. This is 70-30. And so that's a challenge for us.
And it's 70-30 on both sides. The secondary kids are almost 70-30. Their parents are 70-30 against going back.
Right. That's exactly.
So we're 50-50 again, depending on
50-50
secondary and
if it's on a whole.
Secondary and elementary schools.
But you know, the only way to resolve that is to say, yeah, we're going to really disrupt transportation in Bells. But I sort of go, what else can we do? It's 70-30.
But
not
even
50-50.
the elementary schools, if you look at the teachers, it was about 50-50. And if half of our teachers at that level and up to 75% of our teachers at the secondary level feel that they cannot handle giving up the prep time because we have asked so much more of them this year with putting things online, that even though they don't have the home study students, there's still a lot different that they have to do this year. I mean, I think we need good teachers who aren't burned out for our students, and that extra time in the school is not going to be, like Gina was saying, of enough educational benefit if our teachers are struggling with stress levels, mental health. They're doing prep time till 2 in the morning every day because of it. You know, I got an email from a parent that said she's worried this will become the parents versus the teachers. And I don't want to see it that way, because we're all wanting the best education for our students. And we need our teachers to be in their best place to be able to educate our students. And if adding more time to our school day at this point is going to be too much for them, then I think we need to be happy we're in 2.5. I had a parent say to me today, I've got friends who live in other parts of the country. I'm just so glad we've been in school as long as we have this year, right? And we will continue to focus on our students over the next months and years and, catch them up. We're going to be able to do that. And I don't know that killing our teachers for 9 weeks to try to finish out that school year with the more time is going to be worth it.
Can I ask a couple questions? I just have a couple quick questions. Maybe someone can help confirm. I believe that it's already been stated by both of our neighboring school districts, Alpine and Nebo, that they are not going to go to full day before the end of their school years, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so both of our neighbors are planning to stay in their relative 2.5, whatever they're at. And then one of the things I feel like maybe you just said, Jennifer, but hadn't been said very much before, but one of my biggest concerns with this is the prep time that we're taking from teachers, because I still feel like while home study is under control, we still have groups of kids that are out for long amounts of time, 2 weeks at a time or whatever, under quarantine or whatnot. And it's not quite the same. We're still asking for those kids who have longer absences to have things put online and whatnot, and that still is an extra burden on our teachers, a large extra burden on our teachers. And more so, I believe, in the secondary than in elementary, because one student being absent for that long affects 8 teachers rather than 1 teacher in an elementary level. So that is probably one of my biggest concerns as well with going to phase 3, is just like many have stated, we have asked so much of our teachers, and they've given and given and given, and I'm afraid it may be just too much to ask. Also, I just have to say that I agree with Jennifer on the fact that I'm happy we made it to 2.5. I never dreamed we'd even be having this discussion, talking about 3 at all this school year. So I'm happy that we're at the point where we can talk about it. I never thought we'd ever get here, but I do feel like I'm in the kind of the same spot as Jennifer. If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said absolutely phase 3. But just hearing so much feedback from people that it is just not it's just not the right timing. I feel like I would probably, at this point in this discussion, go ahead and vote to stay where we are rather than move. And completely acknowledging that there are valid reasons on both sides, and that if I had a personal choice, I would send my kids to phase 3 tomorrow. But I know I cannot make that choice for myself. I have to make it for the entire district, and there's just too many things to ignore on the survey and the feedback we've received.
There's a lot to think about too, but I guess I just feel like the safest place for these kids to be is in school. And I know it's going to be it'll be hard, but I feel like that's where kids need to be. And so I'm more in favor of moving to a phase 3.
Are there not after-school programs? I know
Not at all the schools.
What?
Not at all the schools.
Is that a possibility to have them there? Because what I'm worried about too is if we go to phase 3, we have kids who are in after-school programs. I would like to see Provo High pick up some academic tutoring they were doing after school. I'd love to have a conversation about that prior to the pandemic they had. But is there a way to do that, or is it just I know at our elementary schools, the Boys and Girls Club, so that they probably don't go into some of the higher income schools. Is that what it is?
Stephanie, maybe you can.
So a couple schools, and Todd, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, a couple of the schools, particularly secondaries, have done some after-school stuff to help kids out. We were running one after-school route at Timpview and Momi. I don't remember why, but you guys asked to have that canceled for the time being.
It's suspended for the time being so we can get adequate.
Okay, thank you. We'd have to look at just probably transportation problems, because a lot of those kids are probably going to need transportation, so the program would have to stay late enough, again, for buses to run their regular routes, get turned around, go pick up kids. Then that shifts your custodial needs to later. Again, not an impossibility, but a lot of logistical things you'd have to work through.
I talked with Charity Williams today, actually, and she's our after-school coordinator, and I asked her if we were doing after-school programs yet and about the phases, and she said they were starting to look into bringing more after-school programs, but then they heard we were looking at a possible phase 3 and didn't want to move forward till they knew for sure what we were doing. She said that phase 3 would be hard to do the after-school programs because of just the timing of the day and all of that. If we stay in 2.5, that even though it's near the end of the school year, that they could possibly do some in at least some of the schools. Normally they end around the time of testing, but she said they could probably go a little bit longer this year since they haven't had them. So.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nate.
So when we started this year, I remember Todd and I having this discussion where we were like, well, you know, elementary school kids, they're pretty good, they're pretty siloed, but we kind of not sacrificed them, but we said, okay, we're going to go and make sure we keep the secondary kids safe, and we'll catch the elementary school kids up later. And so we made that as a decision. It seems like every step along the way, we've said, okay, the high school kids have all these issues. Elementary school kids, okay, they'll be okay. They'll be okay. And we finally got to the point where, and first of all, let me say, I don't want the secondary schools to go full-time at all. I agree with the parents. I agree with the teachers. It just seems like there's no benefit, and it's a nightmare, and it's not worth the effort. But I feel bad for the elementary school kids. The parents it's 75, it's not 70-30, it's 75-25. The teachers are saying that a large percentage of the teachers are saying they need it, and every step along the way, we've said, okay, elementary schools, we have safety issues at the secondary schools, so you're gonna have to just shorten your days a little bit. And we don't have the safety issues as much with this decision. Instead, it's okay, it's going to be it's not going to be fun, it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be hard on the teachers, the kids are going to hate it, it's not going to be helpful, it's not going to be beneficial. We can go down the list of reasons why we wouldn't do it at the secondary schools, but there's a lot of reasons why we would for the elementary schools, and maybe this time it's time for the secondary schools to take a haircut. And I came into this not knowing how I'd vote one way or the other. I still don't know, but I'm just throwing that out as a point of debate.
Go ahead, McKay.
Can you tell me a little bit about the plan, especially for first grade language arts and 7th grade math going through the summer, and how we're using some of the ESSER funds, how we're using some of the federal funds. There's more federal funds coming from the Rescue Act. It's going to be expected to be expended. If we kill off our teachers at the end of the last 9 weeks of school, is that going to affect what we can do? What's that plan?
The plan is not developed yet. It is still in development. There was a summer school meeting on Friday. I was dealing with the aftermath of a COVID vaccine, so I was not able to attend that. We do need to survey our people out in the community to determine what kind of involvement and engagement there will be among our students. That survey, I believe, Caleb, we're planning to send out tomorrow. And so we're moving in the direction, but in terms of those specific details, McKay, we don't have them yet. The goal is to engage as many students as possible in as comprehensive a way as possible, but a lot of it depends on the individual students who sign up for it and what their specific individual needs are. We're probably going to be looking at students in this program a little bit more like each of them is. I'm hesitant to use this term because we won't be having formal IEPs, but it'll be more of an individualized approach. And so the plan is that we can do as much of that as possible. Some of it, our big concern right now is, will we have teachers who want to take part in it? And we're expecting hopefully some interest among at least some of our younger teachers to help us out in that way. But we know that principals are right now checking in with their teachers and trying to find out what kind of interest. It has come to me by way of third hand that some teachers have said, well, I guess to a certain extent it's going to depend on my energy level once the school year is over. And that's probably not inconsistent with what you've either heard or suspected. So that's what I know right now.
You swaying me, Nate, one way or the other.
I tried to tell Melanie, let's not even have this meeting. I begged her. I begged her.
Can I ask a question?
To happen.
So Nate, I guess Nate, and I feel like McKay, maybe you're leaning this way too, but my question is, so are you two advocating for the plan where we make elementary a full day and then we have the high schools adjust?
You know, right now I'm just being a lawyer and just jumping in on the side that I think's losing. So that's not helpful for anyone and probably make everyone mad at me, but that's what I'm doing right now.
I agree with Gina. You know, we shouldn't touch what we shouldn't touch. There's a price to pay for everything we do, and certainly on secondary, let's not touch it. You know, so that's solid in my mind. Let's not touch secondary. So what gain can I get? Again, I've got another 75% on the elementary school. What gain can I get without touching secondary? So if I'm not going to touch secondary, what can I do? I guess is what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, and it sounds like from Stephanie's example of what the bell schedules would have to be, there's just not really a way to do that, right? So
There's a way to do it, it's just complicated.
it's complicated, but there is
It's
a way,
complicated and it's gonna require more change and more adjustments at the
So that does-
secondary.
It's a change regardless.
it's a
to
change
everybody.
regardless, right? So
It
so
would,
really the only
it would require
two,
that much more change on top of changing to phase 3.
So the way I see it with that example is that really the two only feasible options, either everyone in phase 3 or everyone stays in 2.5.
Which, you know, that's why I'm asking, you know, so if, you know, we have to, to me, I'm worried about first grade, I'm worried about 7th grade math, those skills, to have skills in me, because 7th grade math shows up in failed classes in high school, in algebra or secondary math 1 and 2, the graduating, and so and you know, I hate to, you know, I don't even know what to do with DLI. DLI is just pure time. It's just pure time. And so, and there's just a lot of people that are worried about that. So, you know, I don't want to change, but I guess I want to investigate what we can gain.
And I guess that's where I am at, where I just feel like the time thing, this is a chance for us to get the opportunities there to help narrow that gap. There's no way to fill it, but to narrow it.
Narrowing the gap would require, I believe, targeting the populations who are behind, not everybody. So I think if we're talking specifically about narrowing the gap, that means we target the kids who are behind, not everybody, which is just my observation.
But everybody can value extra time in a classroom.
Yes, so if you're talking about just extra time and can we get some kind of gain for 80% of the population, then yes. But if you're wanting to narrow the gap specifically, you need to target the kids who are further behind.
Okay.
Well, and I know it's hard when your first grader, you know, is not where they should be with reading or with their DLI, and how concerning that must be for parents. And yet what McKay was saying about time, I mean, next year's teachers are going to be fully aware of that, and they're going to meet them where they're at and take them where they need to be and keep working with them. And so with time, they will get caught up. And so it might feel so, you know, stressful now, but I have so much confidence, and we have wonderful teachers in this district. And I know that they're going to work hard the rest of the school year for those who come to summer school and next school year and beyond. And, you know, so whether we add more time now or not, we're going to get there.
I'm just going to take a little detour and this still is COVID related, but it has to deal with Camp Big Springs. We need to make a decision on Camp Big Springs tonight.
Do we have more information?
Alex, do you want to talk about that? Because I don't see Chad here.
Alex is silently cursing Chad for having left without announcing.
I'll get my makeup on. I'll make it up to him later. Don't worry.
Alex, can't really understand you. Can you take it down?
Yeah. So yesterday, just as a follow-up to the request from the board when we met on the retreat, was to just find out a little bit more about Camp Big Springs and the situation at hand. Here's what I know, and I'll leave it at that. It sounds like to the south of us, they're looking at making a go of it. North of us, they still haven't made a decision as to what they're going to do for their summer camp. But the things that, as we processed with Suzanne Livingston, the things that are starkly different about Camp Big Springs versus some of the neighboring communities is the facilities. So when you start thinking about a school setting, there are things that we can control within the school setting that allow us to be able to say we are still meeting the CDC guidelines and being very articulate in how we can control what we can control, right? When you start putting kids in a program down in Nebo, I ran it for 4 years. I was there for running the camp. They have 2 large cabins for kids alone where the bunks are set up with bunk beds on the bottom, bunk beds on the top, they're separated by a gap between them, so there is a good distance between each kid, and they're not going to be within that 6 feet piece there. The other thing that they do have is that they have a bathroom and a shower, running water, and a facility that is also used for the adults that have all those facilities as well. And then they also have an outdoor pavilion that's covered, that's a hard structure developed and built, as well as outdoor bathrooms and a place that is more permanent for cooking and other things. When you talk about Camp Big Springs, there aren't those facilities. Everything is a tent that we have really condensed and put kids in tight quarters and tight situations. Also that we're talking about the running water. He didn't get away. You're also talking about there's not the same level of facilities to be able to be sanitary and clean and take care of. So in looking at those scenarios and looking and talking to Suzanne Livingston, the comment that she made was, well, maybe you could just set up Camp Big Springs in the back of one of the schools. That's what we did. Like, I don't know if Suzanne's ever taken youth out on a trip, but once people in the community find out that there's going to be other youth overnight camping, it becomes quite the adventure, and it's just a nightmare to manage. And so with that said, she looked at all the scenarios and looked at kind of our situation, and right now her recommendation is not knowing enough, and we don't have it down the road far enough. She would probably recommend against running this camp just because of the sanitary situation and facilities to really maintain and keep us, not only the students, but the adults safe in that process. Now, could we force issues and make things happen in certain ways? Potentially. But again, we don't know what we don't know yet. We're still trying to navigate this and how far we get down the road. Looking at trying to keep students safe as well as adults safe. She was kind of in that mode of saying, man, that's a tough one. That's a real tough call to make, and not feeling confident with it. So anything else, Chad, you would add to that?
No, other than, what Alex already said. I was listening out there. I was like, do I want to go in there? Yeah, I was. I had YouTube going out on my phone. So I was debating whether I wanted to come in. But no, absolutely. I've talked to both districts recently. Alpine is really on the fence. Nebo is really trying to, from what I understand, they really want to do something, but their camps are a lot different than ours, as Alex has kind of already mentioned. So
Nebo also runs a much shorter week.
There's only two and a half days.
Mm-hmm. Ours is 4.5 days. And to be honest, having been to both, I absolutely put Camp Big Springs way above what's done in Nebo. And I did it in Nebo. But watching what happens here, it is pretty if there was a storm or there was another scenario where we couldn't let kids just walk and be outside eating, and they were all crammed under a tiny army tent.
Right, social distancing
It would be
becomes an issue.
impossible to social distance in some of those scenarios. And every year, you're going to run into some of those storms in June, no matter what you do.
It's amazingly rustic, but we love it that way. I mean, it's army tents on wood platforms. Some of you have been there and had kids go there. It's an amazing place. Just hard in this
I'll put
scenario.
a plug in. If you haven't been, let's work.
Please come.
I will put a plug in. I went a couple years ago, and it was one of my best nights of the summer.
Yeah, Jennifer.
So as part of that conversation, and I'm just not aware how this works, did it ever come up if we tested everybody before they went up? How does that alleviate or not alleviate any concerns? I mean, if everyone got a negative COVID test, does that make it easier to have everyone gather?
I think if I remember her comment right, the COVID test only goes for 48 hours. Is that right? So you have to retest again after 48 hours. So where ours is so long and it makes it a lot harder, we'd have to do another one in between and play that game.
So she's worried that people would test negative but maybe still have it?
It's possible, but.
Okay.
And when you get up there, this is again one of those struggles is that you get up there and one kid gets sick. You can't wear a mask at night. It really is one of those catch-22s. So and we talked about the kind of protocol of what we would do, and if one kid started to get a fever, you're basically looking at the whole camp and doing a whole contact tracing, and so then you add that to contact tracing and making sure that you know where every kid is all day long, and it would be really a difficult conversation or process, plus having a nurse up there to help us manage all of that and making all the phone calls and getting a bus up there to get everybody back down while you have everybody that gets.
Yeah, buses can't quite make it. We're 1.5 miles from where the buses are.
So they have to hike down. There's just a lot of complications there.
I'll be the ogre. No. We've got to target everybody in some target in the summer. We're going to have to use all of our teachers, all of our resources for some other targets. And this is a great thing that, if we weren't fighting everything, we would fight to the death to keep Camp Big Springs, but I don't see how we can do it and keep it with everything, not just the logistics of it happening, everything else we have to do in this summer just seems too much. To have a choice in program. I think we have to have a program that we're inviting.
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are at that point where you've kind of almost missed the deadline already.
Yeah, but usually by Friday of this week, we've had registration done, and we've already visited schools and done quite a bit up to this point. I mean, we could still do it, but any further than this is going to be hard.
Don't worry, Sadie.
Go ahead, Terry.
For the kids who missed last year and this year, next year, could they do like a day camp to make up for what they've missed?
There's always a possibility to look at something like that. Nothing's out of the.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the kids who are missing, because hopefully next year you will be able to do it again.
Your complexity runs into if we were back to normal and running full camp, then try to bring up older kids to be a part of that. There is some complexity, and July is really, by the time of the end of June, you've run out of water, period, to be able to access.
Well, they don't have to go all the way up to Camp Big Springs, but maybe they can do some version of it here at one of the campuses.
I think Todd would be willing to run that camp in the back of one of his very much. Because now they're secondary kids, I'm on board with them.
So I'd like to comment on something that's a little bit related, but not directly. Chad, could we at some point get you to put together, maybe working with Mark and the city, an estimate about what it would cost to change out the facilities up there? I realize it's the city property, but they do let us use it. To change it out to something that would be more viable along the line of what Nebo does in terms of their structure, their coverage, their bunk beds. I mean, we put kids on the floor, and And so the challenge is be able to socially distance them when they're all sleeping side by side on the floor. So, you know, it seems to me like the facilities, while rustic and wonderful in some ways, they're also potentially holding us back in the ability to do some other things up there that we've wanted to do for a long time. So could we at least look at that? Who knows if that is a big enough priority for the board to want to spend, for example, some fund balance on. But we don't really know how much to even consider until we know what the cost is going to be.
Yeah, I can absolutely get with Mike.
I don't mean to intrude on the board's.
The only thing that comes to my mind is just security, like making sure that nobody's up there. I mean, you have to hike up there to get there, and there's a gate, but keeping it from being vandalized.
That's a struggle, I think,
in any of them.
Even Nebo, that is a struggle, and we would have to do some just coordination with the city to ensure that we would make sure that it's secured before we hit the winter months, and then in the summer somebody would have to be just monitoring and checking in on a regular basis.
Do you have some questions? Go ahead. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah. I mean, I think I get a sense of where we're headed anyway, but I did want to follow up with a question from last time. We asked it, maybe about the possibility of just doing a day camp instead if we couldn't have overnight. Did you look into that anymore?
Yeah, we've looked into that a little bit. Alpine does something where the school does it for them. Like, so last year, that's what Alpine did is the school, like 5th grade teachers, did something for the kids one night. That's something that's been done in Alpine. Nebo, as far as I know, didn't do much last year. Didn't do anything as far as makeup was concerned. But I mean, there are those type of possibilities you could do. We'd have to investigate. We've talked to a few of our teachers. Some of them are willing to do something like that. So there is a possibility. We'd have to investigate and look into it a little bit further.
But let me also say that this group of teachers, these are really good teachers, and they would be really good in our summer school. And so the question is, where do we put them to work?
Yeah.
So we know that we have a massive need in summer school. We talked about that at the retreat. So that's one of our dilemmas.
I respect the teachers enough. I'll have them help with tech, if nothing else, during the summer.
And I have a question about that too. Is it also too late to get a day camp organized? I mean, it's a little bit late to even start working on Big Springs. Is it too late to get something like that organized in time?
It'd be difficult at this point just to try and organize the teachers and organize the events and that kind of thing. But yeah, we can look into it a little bit more if you'd like.
Do we need to make a vote on that in the business meeting?
About
Camp Big Springs?
Or do we just need to give you a
Just a recommendation.
Well, I'll do it. I'll be the most unpopular guy in town, but our recommendation would be that we suspend camp for this year again.
And then just tell all this year's 5th graders to go to the summer school with one of the Camp Big Springs teachers because they're going to make it fun like Big Springs, right?
Yes, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed that Camp Big Springs happens next year.
Amen.
And just so you know, Chad is probably the biggest proponent of Camp Big Springs, and so it's hard for us to kind of look at this way because we see the value of it, but we also recognize there's a tension here, so we'll support that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, back to, is there any other further follow-up on COVID stuff? Okay, seeing none, let's move on. I can't even speak right now. Consent calendar, is there any questions about it?
I do.
All right, go ahead, Terry.
Well, on the first, I think the first thing on the consent calendar is the minutes. And when I was trying to read the minutes and I was trying to match it up with YouTube, there's a whole lot of missing stuff in the minutes. The whole discussion we had about Wasatch and what location, it's not there. It's completely gone. And then I had to quit comparing it because there's just so much missing in the minutes. There's the whole discussion on the technology update, the budgeting priorities, the land trust, the sex ed curriculum, and the Raptor system are not there. So
Is there nothing there, or is it just abbreviated? Because minutes are often
there was
abbreviated.
a discussion. But my question is, do we have to submit our minutes to a state agency?
Yes, we submit them as well as the audio to Utah Public Notice.
So we have to submit the written minutes and the audio. So until those are fixed, I can't vote for this. There's a whole bunch of missing information on the written minutes.
Especially in a study session, usually it's almost the subject. It's not sort of the back and forth.
They'll submit the tape too.
The recording there is like, so I would expect like the people looking on the stage.
So we're also voting on the recording.
What was talked about? Wasatch, does it say Wasatch was talked about, or does it say?
No.
It doesn't say?
It kind of skips around and conversations don't make sense, and I was, all of a sudden I made a comment on something and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. It was very odd to me. Yeah.
I see
So,
there's stuff here.
But I'm looking at it here too, so I'm seeing Dixon.
well, before we talked about Dixon, there was the Wasatch conversation, and there's just a whole lot missing.
I guess can I ask a question? I'm not familiar with how it's supposed to be done, and I was under the impression that it's not supposed to be word for word, but it's just supposed to be like notes, which is how I've always thought it's supposed to be done, and I've always felt like the minutes were done well as far as like just notes on. So maybe someone can clarify for us how the minutes are supposed to be
Bonnie,
recorded.
you want to talk to us about your process?
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to review it too and change whatever you want me to. I have been, since I'm fairly new, I've been trying to put as much in there as I can, but I do abbreviate things. I try to put the important things in. I'm kind of the one who judges that, so I may be missing things, and that's part of why you review it and let me know what I need to change. I have been told that I tend to put more in than is necessary and that I should abbreviate more, so I'm trying to learn what to leave out and what not to leave out. So I appreciate your help on that. Whatever you want me to do, I will change for it, especially since we're talking about these two. There's time for me to change it, and it can come before you again next month to approve it when you're happy with it, if you want.
Because when I read minutes from the state legislature, and county commission meetings and city council meetings, they're word for word. There's no abbreviation. There's no shortcuts. Because sometimes it's easier to read the notes than to listen because the audio is not always accurate.
Chad, there are technologies that we could take those recordings and have them put into written minutes? Because to type up word for word would be pretty lengthy.
There are, and some of them work okay. It's not perfect, but
Okay. With YouTube, there is a transcript that I use, and sometimes I just copy and paste it. I do have to, it's not always right. I have to play with it to make it right, and it takes a while to do that, so I don't do it with every conversation. And also, it's not always there, and I'm not sure what that is. I think sometimes YouTube can make it work, and sometimes they can't. So the afternoon session, I believe it was, of our board retreat, there was no transcript for, and the audio was poor. But again, I can look at it again.
one more point too on that, we're making this way harder to even have anything interpretable.
So I remember when I was new to the board, someone told me to look over the minutes ahead of time, and if there was anything that was glaring, like maybe they quoted me so off that it was wrong, right? That we can also reach out to Bonnie before this meeting and work things out with her as well.
Absolutely. I don't get offended easily. Anything you need me to.
So
I think if the main points are there and we feel good about, that it represents overall our discussions and things, then I don't know that we need word for word.
So I'm just looking over House Education Committee meeting. This was a 2.5-hour meeting. The minutes are 4 pages long, 3 and some other pages. So 1 page is sort of attendance. 1 page, 2 pages are just the votes. The next one is someone spoke for this bill, someone spoke against it. They don't have the content of their comments. They don't have any of the content of the legislators' comments at all, or any of the legislators. So they'll say, can you ask for summation, or will you? They don't have any of that comment. They just said, this came up, we discussed it, it was voted on. That's from, that's the legal standard. That's much less than currently what we have.
Then we need to be consistent then. If we're going to be following what other state agencies are doing or what we're legally required to do.
Right.
Because right now it's just all over the place.
So we need to tell Bonnie to tone it down then.
So, yeah, Melanie.
That's, yeah.
Whatever legally we have to do.
I'm for whatever the least amount of work. Since we have the audio, I'm for whatever the least amount of work for Bonnie.
I would like to contact audio anytime.
I would like to contact you, Bonnie, because I said a lot of things in the last section that I would like to change because my inbox is very negative right now. So.
Plus, now that
they do still have the audio.
People can watch that too.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes it easier. But it just seems so inconsistent that I was very concerned if we have to submit this to state agency, what are we legally required to do?
So I have a meeting with an attorney later on in the week, and I raised that question.
So we'll look into that. But as far as I can tell, that
I think the other thing is, sorry to butt in, the other thing is kind of what Jennifer said. I think it'd be helpful if, Bonnie, if you can make sure that this is out in enough time so the board members can give us feedback prior to this meeting so that we can get it cleaned up and then it's easier to vote on if there are those issues. So, thank you.
Okay, was there any other concerns about the consent calendar?
Yes.
All right, well,
I had a question about homeschool. I think this is Doug. This is you. The report is only for March 2021, right? And not the whole school year?
Right, those represent new applications.
Okay, new. Not, this is the total number of students that is doing homeschool.
Yeah, we can generate that number for you at any time, but what we submit to you is I think just meant to be applications that we receive.
No, I had an incident. On Friday, I was at the rec center at the swimming pool, and there was a gigantic amount of students there, and I asked them all, and they all said they were homeschool students, and I was like, I didn't realize how many homeschool students we had. Because normally when I go to the rec center with my son in the morning on purpose, because all the kids are in school.
This year is very different that way, to say the least, right? Where kids are during the school day.
Yeah. My next question is for you, Stephanie, on page 11 of the financial. The page 11 is food services, and it said there's $25,000 for property. Can you explain what that is?
So that's probably going to mostly be large kitchen appliances, purchases of big equipment that they use in their kitchens.
Okay. And then on page 16, is this for the kindergarten playground at Franklin?
Let me get to page 16. Are you referring?
It just says playground at Franklin, and there's 3. One was recently replaced, and then the kindergarten playground needs to be replaced.
Yeah, so I know Mark's going through and doing a lot of upgrades to many of our playgrounds. I think he brought that up at our board study session. I'll check with him, but he's probably working through. He's probably working through all 3 of those.
Okay.
But I'll double check with him.
And then it still lists Dixon tennis courts. Do we need to remove that because nothing's going to happen, or?
I see Dixon
what's going on?
Yeah, we'll remove that.
Yeah, we'll remove it. I'm not seeing that, but.
Down under building
It's a
improvement
tiny little print.
What page is that on again, Terry?
16.
16, Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so what happens with capital projects is about this time of year when Mark starts going through, we start finalizing budgets and getting ready for the next year's budgets. Mark will go through the projects and see which ones he thought might happen or he might complete that just aren't going to happen. So about this time of year, we start working with him to remove those projects that aren't going to occur.
Okay. And then on the warrant report on page 3, why did we pay the Utah County Auditor $94,693.95?
We have an annual, Devin, do you want to help me with that one? We have an annual fee that we pay the county auditor.
Oh, so that goes through the auditor's office?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Devin.
And then what is DHE Computer Systems?
That's where we buy all of our Chromebooks.
Okay, that's the company?
It is a company.
Okay, and on page 13, why did we pay Tri-Phase Electric $769.39?
I'll have to go pull that back up. I can't memorize every single check we do, but I can pull that back up.
What is Tri-Phase Electric anyway?
Tri-Phase Electric, we use them for a lot of different stuff in our construction. I think we use some of it for Chad's infrastructure type things.
Okay.
So it could be a number of things. I can pull that and get that for you.
So Tri-Phase, I think, is the entrance projects for the schools. So the security, the secure entrances to all the schools.
Oh, so like the Raptor system?
Yep, they're installing all the back end cables.
Okay.
Things to make that happen.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Any other further discussion? All right, let's look at the upcoming calendar. Just a note that the next study session has been moved a week to March 30th at 7:30 a.m. We then have spring break, April 5th through the 9th. Then we have our next PTA Executive Board meeting at April 13th at 9:30 a.m. And then our next business meeting and study session will be April 20th at 5 p.m. Any comments or questions about that?
And we also just need to remember the March 18th.
That's correct. March
Joint
18th,
council meeting.
18th is at noon would be our joint city
Did you
council
say at
meeting.
noon? I was at noon? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that'll be at noon.
Via Zoom.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay.
You should have a regional meeting.
Oh, that's right. We have on March 16th, right?
Yep.
What
So,
time is that at?
6 o'clock. It's on-
And that's
it's
via
on
Zoom, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so March 16th, the regional meeting. Okay,
And our region has a vote to make, right?
Yes. Yep.
so
What time is that at?
6 p.m.
o'clock.
Okay.
So, any other further discussion on the calendar? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move
Study
we
session.
adjourn this meeting.
A motion made by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
I second.
Second made by Board Member Hale. And we are adjourned. We will meet back here at 7 o'clock.